This video is brought to you by Kate Backdrop, katebackdrop.com, because not only do they make backdrops, they make floor drops. So I've got a traditional rug underneath my table over here, but I've got this set on top of it, and it has this super grippy nylon back, and it feels like a gigantic mouse pad. That's the only way I could describe it. But you can pretty much get anything you want printed on these. And this one's fairly large. And I want to say this is like 5 by 8. So the same size as my area rug over there, actually. Really nice stuff. So check them out at katebackdrop.com. I present to you the Samyang 35mm f2.8 FE lens for Sony full frame. And this is the lightest and smallest autofocus lens you can actually put on a Sony full frame camera. And guess what? It doesn't suck. This little nugget has 7 elements in 6 groups, and 2 of those elements are spherical and 1 element is a high refractive element. Lots of lens coatings and a 7-bladed aperture that's curved, thank God. And the back side of this is made of metal, which is good, not a plastic mount. The side, I believe this lower section is made of aluminum, and then the front part is all plastic, which shouldn't surprise you at all for the weight. It also fits tightly on the camera. It's not loose or anything like that. Excellent fit, but the thing that's really weird about it is the front. It has this 49mm thread, but comes with the world's lamest lens cap. I don't understand this at all. So you've got this massive lens cap that screws over the front, but then you've got this tiny 40.5mm cap that comes off. And basically what that does is that allows you to get scratches on your lenses if that little cap falls off in your bag. So I don't really understand the design of this, but whatever, it is what it is. Can't use it as a lens hood either, so yeah, I guess you're just stuck with it. Alright, let's talk lens weight here for a second. Sorry if I'm a little echoey. So this is the 35mm f1.4. This weighs almost 24 ounces, or roughly 1.5 pounds, or 677 grams. The little Samyang Pancake f2.8 weighs in at just 106 grams, or 3.7 ounces, or not even 1/4 pound. Just to put it into context, this 4-pack of batteries is 123 grams, or 4.3 ounces, so definitely heavier. This Viltrox adapter, and by the way, this is the Mark IV adapter, this is 4.7 ounces, 4.75, or 1/3 pound, or 136 grams. So that just goes to show you this lens is lighter than an adapter you use to put lenses on your camera. That's pretty insane. I mean, this thing weighs nothing. The old school Sigma Art 30mm f2.8 for APS-C size, 141 grams. And now for the Samyang, are you ready for it? 90 with no lens caps. That is freaking light. You're going to find this hard to believe, but this is my A7R and my OMD EM1 Mark II, and my A7R is actually an ounce lighter with that lens on it than my OMD EM1 Mark II Micro Four Thirds. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to compare the rinky-dinky Samyang 35mm f2.8 against its big brother, the 35mm 1.4, but I just kind of figured you guys would kind of dig seeing this in use. So we're going to go ahead and get a few shots of Blair here and see what we get. Alright, so now we're going to do the 35mm f1.4. We're going to shoot this one at f2.8, but I'll also show you what you're missing by not getting f1.4 by shooting at f1.4. And you can see that these images are actually pretty close to each other. So let me just zoom in here and show you in the face in detail. There's slightly more chromatic aberrations, and you can see it just in the center of her eyes there on the Samyang Pancake, but realistically it's pretty damn sharp. Not quite as sharp as the Rokinon 35mm 1.4, but it is close. I mean, really close. And if we go to look at the out of focus areas, it's not as buttery smooth as you can see in the highlights, but it's not bad. You know, so when we zoom out, not quite as soft as the 35mm 1.4, but pretty good. And you know, to be honest with you, it would be so hard to tell these apart. Now, sharpness wise, the Rokinon's gonna be a little bit better than this one, but not by much. I mean, it tests really, really close. I shot again both lenses at f2.8, and again, it's so hard to tell the difference. If I zoom in here and look at her eyes, I mean, really zoom in, it's so hard to tell, like, which one's which. Here's what you're missing. So this side is, again, the Pancake at f2.8, and this is the 35mm at f1.4. And you can see how dramatically more buttery the background is, and how we've got a lot more separation. Alright, so here's a little different context for you. So this side is the Rokinon 35mm f1.4, and over here is the Samyang 35mm f2.8. They're both shot at the same aperture, and if we go in and look, pretty much the background looks the same. You know, you don't really see a huge difference between the two. Again, the 35mm f1.4 is maybe a little smoother around in these trees over here, but just barely. So over here is the Rokinon 35mm 1.4, and then this is the Samyang 35mm f2.8. You know, the background is definitely separated more on the 1.4, but again, when it comes to actual sharpness, the little 35mm Pancake's doing a really good job. It doesn't look as dreamy as this one, but still a very clean looking image. So, you know, even though you don't get nearly as good separation of background, it's really pretty good. In the studio, you can see there's a big difference. So over here is a Samyang 35mm f2.8, shot at f2.8. Over here is the 35mm f1.4, shot at 1.4. And you can again see that there's a separation in background. The 1.4, when it's wide open, actually shoots a little bit warmer, and you can see that difference in the face here. But still, a really excellent lens for shooting wide open at f2.8 for just such a little Pancake. And let's go in and just look at her eyes again. So anyway, here's the difference between the two. So yeah, really actually pretty good. So here's the same scenario with the shot at f1.4 on the Rokinon on this side. And again, the Pancake 2.8 on this side, and both all the way open. And you can see just how much more that 1.4 just gets everything out of focus and makes, you know, really nice little bokeh balls in the background for you. So, you know, there's definitely an advantage to 1.4, but still a very usable picture. So, you know, if we zoom in here, the Pancake here is definitely way sharper than 1.4 all the way open. I mean, that's just kind of obvious. But looking at the bokeh next to her head, this to me is a lot more pleasing than this. But realistically, the f2.8 is completely usable. It's just not as, it just doesn't have as good of out of focus areas as the 1.4. So I shot this with the A7R full frame, and this is with lens correction turned off at f2.8, just so you can see what's going on. And we've got a little dip in the corners up here, and you know, it's kind of turning in a little bit of a fisheye effect. And it's a 3-stop difference from the extreme corner to the center of the image, so there's definitely some vignetting going on. Now this shot is with lens correction turned on, and again it's at f2.8, and if I go to the corners, you'll see that they're dramatically improved. They don't dip in nearly as much as they did before, and it looks for a pretty linear image, although you do still have a 1.5 stop difference from the extreme corners to the center, so it doesn't really correct everything. Now this shot is at f22, and the reason why I shot this was to show you that even though it's still decently sharp, it does fall off a little bit, and there is a little bit of diffraction sitting in after f11. But realistically, it's still very usable. So this lens is usable at all f-stops, which is really kind of nice. Now I wanted to show you this shot. This is also shot at f22, and the closest focusing distance that you can get to something is about 13 inches away. So this line of leaves through here is what's actually in focus. And so the foreground has a very slight out of focus, and then the background is kind of the same way. Now this is the same plant at f2.8, and you can see here these are the flowers that I'm actually hitting. Those are 13 inches away from the camera, and you can see that those are like perfectly in focus. Lens flare actually looks pretty well controlled. Try to get it just below the frame here. Yeah, lens flare is pretty well controlled. It's when you get up into the corners that it starts to have issues, but when it's in the center of the frame, no issues at all. Just extreme corners. It has these little clicking creeps when it autofocuses. When you force it though, it can get really noisy. Right now I'm hitting the shutter button to make it autofocus in the center. That's what you're hearing, that buzzing noise. Yeah, I don't know that I would recommend this lens for like doing selfie video, because the AF is actually pretty noisy. So if you wanted to use it on board with, like, say, the camera's microphone, like I am right now with the Sony a7R III, probably not the best choice, because this thing is loud. I mean, it just chatters like a little bit all the time. Not completely annoying, but a little distracting. All right, let me sum this up for you. If you're shooting night skies and you want a lens that's good for coma, don't look at this lens. It's terrible as far as coma goes. The 35mm f1.4 that I just reviewed is excellent for night skies. So the coma on this is really very good, but this thing, not so much. Now, this lens is sharp pretty much across the frame from f4 through f11, and it seems to be really good like around f5.6 and f8. It's definitely decently sharp at f2.8 in the center, and the corners are just okay. They do fall apart a little bit. But still, if I compare the images that I shot a couple of weeks ago with the Sony Zeiss 35mm 1.4 against this, just the test images from 2.8 through f11, this is actually equally as good as that copy was. So if that kind of gives you an idea. As far as I've seen in other test reviews, the 35mm f2.8 Zeiss, the little lens that's almost this size, it's slightly heavier, this pretty much does better in every area against that except for autofocus. That one is dead silent. This one makes just a little bit of noise, but it's still not bad. Now, build quality wise, I think it's pretty good. It's not dust resistant or moisture resistant or anything like that, but if you want a light, cheap walk around lens that you can use, I say dive on it. It's definitely worth the price, and I actually love this lens. I think it's just so damn cool. It is as light as my Micro Four Thirds camera. I say dive on it. But anyway, hope you guys like this video. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment. Otherwise, we'll talk to you guys later. See ya.